So hello and welcome to this video on the Monomachine by Elektron. It's a really interesting box that when I post videos on like my Instagram or previous videos on YouTube, lots of people get in touch wanting to know more about it. So I thought I'd do just a video today of how I kind of like just jam with it. So I guess that's what today's video is going to look at. We're just going to jam it on the Monomachine for a couple of minutes, see if we can kind of get anywhere. Maybe just a few notes about the setup before I start. So I'm using the 6 outputs of the Monomachine. I've got these routed into individual tracks in Ableton. This just means that anything that I capture on these 6 channels during the course of this, I can kind of maybe use that in for future recordings or for future tracks or anything like that. I've also got a Soma Pulsar 23 drum machine linked up to the Monomachine. I'm controlling the Monomachine, I'm sequencing the Pulsar 23 via the Monomachine. I've got a video on this previously on my channel. I'll put a link to it in the description where you can find out how to do that. But yeah, I think I'm just going to be jamming for a couple of minutes and let's see how we get where we get to. To kind of speed up or to save a bit of time, I've already kind of assigned some machines to each of the 6 Monomachine tracks. So I've got this kind of bass noise here, kind of like a distorted pulse wave here, kind of like a chord sound on this channel, another one of the FM tracks here on track 4, one of the wavetable synths on track 5, and the SID machine on track 6. So I'm going to be jamming out and I'll try to explain things kind of as I'm going along, but it's really just going to be about kind of hitting buttons, turning knobs. So let's kind of get started. So on the first one, I'm just going to lay down some notes to get a bass track going. Okay, so I'm just going to put some drum triggers down just to kind of hear things in context. I'm just going to go simple 4 on the floor beat to start off with. So again, the drums are being triggered by the Monomachine and being played by the Soma Pulsar 23, which is off screen here. So just kind of wanted to get that simple drum track down just to kind of hear things in context as we're kind of jamming around. First thing I might do is just change from 16-step pattern to 32 steps. And I might start bringing in some of the other Monomachine tracks here. So I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of live record this kind of chordy type sound, which is coming from the S-Wave ENS machine in the Monomachine. I've already kind of done some sound design on this already, but I'll play around with the sound as it is there once we kind of get going as well. So I'm just going to bring some of the drums back in. far so good. So I've got a little bit of a bass track. I might actually just change this. So what I might do is I might just have some longer held notes on this one. So I'll go back to the first trigger. Let's change this to G2. I'm gonna just clear out all of the percussion triggers just for now. Okay. Okay, so I want this to be kind of like a longer held note. So into the amp page, I'm just going to turn the hold up all the way to about 80. That should get me like a half a bar. So the note here is G2. On the second one, I'm just going to go just hold this 2. Pretty much more what I kind of had in my mind. So just a kind of like a sustained held bass notes, offset by this kind of chordy percussive type sound. Take the volume of that bass down a bit, and I've got some distortion on here. I'm just going to lower it down a touch as well. It really impacts the overall sound, the distortion, in a good way. Okay, so 2 elements I'm semi-happy with already. Let's move on to some additional elements on the Monomachine. So I've got track 2, what have I got in here? This kind of distorted pulse wave. I've got an LFO on this already. I'm just going to turn the LFO off for now. I'm just going to assign it to something I don't want. I'll lower the depth all the way down. Same on this one. Same on this one. So I'm thinking on this one, what I might want this one to do is kind of mirror the bass line. So what I can do is on the Monomachine, I want to copy just the pattern. So if I hold function and copy and keep holding, I'll just get this copy track menu appears, and I can copy the machine, the melody, the track, or the pattern. I'm going to copy the melody, or I'm going to try to do this from track 1 into track 2. Same function, paste, hold, and melody, and you can kind of hear it there, but obviously the amp and filter settings are going to be different. Let's hear that with the bass as well. Doesn't sound great at all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to transpose the second track up a bit, so we can do the transpose settings here in the Monomachine. This sounds a little bit more palatable, but still a bit doesn't sound great. So what I'm going to do is on the filter settings for track 2, I'm going to increase the bass, which is kind of like you can kind of change it from like low pass, band pass, high pass. To my ears, that's how it sounds. I'm sure there's a probably more technical way of explaining it, but so that's it there. The bass. And I'm going to set the filter modulation width. So the width on the filter is about there. I'm going to set the filter modulation backwards, so it kind of subtracts from it. Okay, that's all right. Each of the 6 tracks on the Monomachine all have their own individual delay incorporated in. So I'm going to go into effects. So you've got some EQs, you've got a low EQ and a high EQ, sample rate reduction, and then some delay settings as well. So I'm going to try the delay on track 2. I'm going to bring the delay time down to 16. I'm going to bring the send up to around 20, and then the feedback just to around like 11 o'clock, around there. Let's see how that sounds. I'm just going to play with the delay time setting. So actually, what I might do is I might put a per step setting on the delay time, and maybe some individual feedback. So on the first note, the longer held note, I'm going to keep that at 32 delay time, and I'm going to increase the feedback. On the next note, I'm going to put that down from delay time of 32 to 16. I'm going to bring the feedback down a touch, but bring the send up. And then on this one here, I'm going to bring the send back down, feedback up, and I'm going to bring the delay time all the way down to 8. So you can hear that what's happening is the different delay, feedback, send, and time sendings are all kind of interacting with each other, but on a per step basis. Like this one has a longer feedback with a shorter time, which means that it's ringing out a bit more at a lower time, but then when it hits this one, it's got a lower feedback and a higher time, so it's kind of cancelling it out. I'm not entirely happy with how the filtering sounds. I might just add some LFOs back in. So you've got 3 LFOs per track. I want the synth. Let's see what pages. So select the page. So the synth destination will be, I'm going to go sub oscillator 1. I'm going to send it from, the trig settings to trig. The multiplication to 8 by triangle wave, and I'm going to increase the depth. Let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, that sounds good. So that was one sub 1. I'm going to control another synth kind of parameter with LFO 2. One of the unison type settings. I'm going to go saw wave at a 16 multiplication setting again on trig. Just playing around with the LFO shape here on this one, just to see if I can kind of get something that sounds a bit more interesting and in conjunction with the multi-time as well. Okay, so kind of like how this is going, it's kind of turning more from like a paddy type sound into like more of a rhythmic texture type thing. So for LFO 3, I'm going to do something with the filter. I'm going to do an exponential wave, which is kind of just like a quick envelope. I'm going to put that on like maybe 4x mult, and then on the trig setting, I'm going to change that to trig. So trig, it'll reset the LFO every time a trigger is entered. Do you know what? Now in context, those effects are a bit too much. So I'm going to bring the feedback down on this step. I'm going to send down on this one just slightly, just a touch, and this one here too. I'm going to leave all the time settings as they were. Okay. So that's kind of a decent enough start. Happy enough with where this is going. I'm going to start just adding in some drum triggers again from the Pulsar 23, just to kind of create a little bit of a backing beat. So when you're controlling the Pulsar 23 with the Monomachine, you're doing it via the MIDI channels here, and obviously you've got a length setting. So what I can do is I can play around with making some of the hats shorter, the kicks longer. So let me just mute the Pulsar, or sorry, the Monomachine tracks just for now. Concentrate on the Pulsar for a second. So I'm going to make the hi-hat noises like really short, just like a length of 1. On the kick drum, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change some of the per step settings on the length, and you'll kind of hear what that kind of sounds like. So I'm going to change the first one here to let's go to 5/16. So you can hear there it's a really long note, and then what I can do is this one, take some of these triggers out, and instead I'll replace them again, that longer style note. Might go a bit longer again. Yeah, let's hear what that sounds like. So you can hear long note, short, 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 long. Okay. And you can do that with any of the triggers here. So I've got like a bit of a percussive type noise on number 2, like a clap snare on number 3. So I'll set the default length on all of the snare ones down to 1, so it's super short. And then what I might do is on some of them, so this is the second page, I'll increase the length of this one. Kind of hear this clap echoes out a lot more. So on the hats, I've got all of these then defaulted to the lowest possible length. And the good thing here is that I have velocity control on the Monomachine, and the Pulsar 23 responds to velocity control as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to live record on the Monomachine just some velocity changes that'll take an impact on the hi-hats. So even though I've got a trigger on every single step, because I've changed the velocity settings on here, on what's triggering the Monomachine, it's going to kind of give me this rising and falling kind of effect. So without even using an LFO, just live recording using the Elektron step sequencer. What I can also do as well on channel 2 on the Pulsar 23 has 2 parameters on it, shape and warp. And what I can do is I can assign these to the CC settings here on the Monomachine. So I'm going to map this one to CC1, that's shape, and warp on CC2. So I'm going to mute all these. And you can hear. So I'm just going to change these on a per step setting, just so that they're slightly different to each other. Just a subtle change, or maybe not so subtle. It just means that when this is kind of playing around in the background on its own, it's going to be a bit less boring. Add some reverb on the Pulsar. I'll adjust some of the filter settings here too. And tune. Okay. sound a bit better. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the mono machine. I'm going to try going into this machine, FM machine. Just going to live record some notes in. That's it with the original kind of bass that I'd laid underneath it. Sounds okay. So I'm going to start playing with some of the LFO settings on track 4, just to kind of see what we can kind of get. Generally, I find just by on this particular machine, the FM static machine, assigning LFO to some of these parameters, not the frequency. Not channel 1 or 2 frequency, but some of the like fine tune, volume, envelope, feedback, and tone controls produce some of the more interesting and kind of sonically interesting, not really wild kind of results. So I'll play around with some of these by assigning these to LFO 1, 2, and 3. Track 2 is a bit blah. It sounds okay on its own, but maybe in place with all the other things it doesn't sound great. That's what it is. So what have I done on the transpose? So I've transposed it up by 7. Let's listen to it again with a transpose. So yeah, I copied the bass track. So maybe what I might do is I'll just bring these up maybe to G3. G3, yeah. I think I've done something there to the triggers, but let's see what happens. Something definitely going on with this bass track, which is kind of putting it out of sync with everything else. So I'm just going to play around with this one. Kind of want this to live more in that sub kind of territory, but also have a bit of kind of an interesting kind of character to it as well. Let's hear what it sounds like again with all this stuff. So 2 is a bit too loud, so yeah, distortion and volume settings on this one. Tracks 3 and 4 kind of sound good on their own. Tracks 1 and 2. Meh, kind of not that interesting, but okay. Change the sequence on the pulsar kick drum, just have a bit more of a 4/4 one. I found that maybe that broken beat was kind of just causing a bit too much confusion there, but so you could happily jam out on this one here on track 3. By the filter settings, I'd say. Let's have another look at the LFOs. So hopefully that's a little taster of what you can kind of do with the Monomachine in about 30 minutes. I'll try to put more of these videos up on YouTube over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, thanks for tuning in.